The Russian President Vladimir Putin has overseen the launch of a new hypersonic nuclear missile, which he hailed as an excellent New Year's gift to the nation. The Kremlin claims the Avangard missile successfully hit its target that was 6,000 kilometers away, and it can fly at 20 times the speed of sound. The test comes amid bitter tensions between Russia and the US. Those relations have sunk to their lowest level since the Cold War. Well, we're going to delve into this a little bit more by looking at how the press around the world is talking about it. So joining me in our studio to do that are our reporters Damon Embling and Sergei Dubin, who is the head of our Russian service. So let's start with you, Sergei, because this is, you're going to tell us where the story is all happening. We might imagine the Russian press would be well, let's say enthusiastic about this. Is that the case?
Yes, absolutely, because most of the large circulation press, printed press, is to say the least loyal to Kremlin. The few newspapers that can be seen as pretty objective, like Vedomosti, let's say, they just relate official figures. Actually, it's more or less that everybody can go to the official figures, the stuff that the Ministry of Defense has been giving to the press and to the participants in the meeting where the President Putin overseen the launch. And as you've said, yeah, it's 20 times max speed. The temperature is 1,600, 2,000 degrees, the temperature of the missile itself. Some of the newspapers are really gushing, like ecstatic, like Komsomolskaya Pravda, which is like a more or less tabloid broadsheet publication, and they really sarcastically say, oh, when Putin announced it on the 1st of March, they were saying, oh, it's just cartoons, but now we see this is really some real truth behind it.
Now, we only have the Russian version or sort of account to say how fast this missile is and how strong it is. What is the European and the Western press essentially saying?
On the face of it, this all sounds quite scary, doesn't it, Bal, that they're developing this weapons system that could strike any country in an instant. And I think the European and Western media, the American media, are watching this very closely because, as you were saying before, relations between Europe, the US and Russia have plunged to this all-time low right now. So they're wondering what's going to happen next. And I think we've got a case at the moment of Donald Trump in America and Vladimir Putin in Russia sort of flexing their muscles and saying, who's the strongest and the mightiest, who has the biggest weapon. So there's a war of words going on around this. One UK newspaper I've been looking at this morning, The Independent, their headline is saying Vladimir Putin heralds successful tests of new hypersonic nuclear weapons. But what's actually quite interesting in that article later on, when we talk about this independent verification and actually the real power of this nuclear system, it cites one expert that they spoke to earlier this year when Vladimir Putin unveiled this whole list of weapons in March earlier this year. And this expert was actually saying, and they quote again, that list amounted no more than a horror story. And that expert was saying that actually finance and technology stand in the way of Vladimir Putin and Russia developing these weapons. So, I mean, do you think it's a little bit just words and it won't go any further?
Well, still, anyway, now after the cartoons, as it was said back in March, now we've seen the real deal, and it's at least something that could be verified or touched by happy few. Well, interesting that the Russian press, and you mentioned that both countries are flexing their muscle, because the Russian press is quoting the official or the experts, say it's advancing what the Americans have for 5 or 6 years, because their Project Falcon can just follow a normal trajectory and it's easier to shut it down. And it's slower than our Avangard 4 times. So it's really who has the biggest weapon.
And this is escalating this arms race. Yeah. What I'm interested about is that Vladimir Putin has essentially continued to remain in power on a ticket of saying, we are at war with the West, whether we like to think of it or not. Russia is at war with the West, and I'm the only man who can protect you from the West.
But still, Putin is very careful to emphasize, we did not the ones who started it. They've moved their anti-missile system to our border. We have only just doing this. Or this is the United States who left the nuclear treaty. We're just responding to it. We have to protect ourselves.
But of course, Donald Trump is saying this is an arms race, and Europe is saying that there's a perceived Russian aggression going on right now. So you do have this difficult situation with tensions building between America, Europe and Russia. And actually Donald Trump is actually making his efforts to tackle Russia and China, for that matter, a big part of his defence strategy. Actually been moving parts of the military apparatus to kind of tackle this. Big priority for him right now.
For both of you, how realistic do you think the possibility is that this, what we're seeing now, this Cold War, these words, could escalate into something more real?
Well, let's hope, and he is hoping is just for sure. The risk could be too great for all parties involved, I guess.
I think both sides, there's a lot of tough talking going on here, and we have to kind of try and sometimes cut through that. But obviously, everybody wants to try and avert the risk of a war happening. I mean, one of the tabloids in the UK today is saying Vlad's rocket, Russia successfully launches its Avangard missile, ready for war in 2019. Quite a provocative headline there, but let's hope that these tensions don't go any further, I think.